Good day, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here again. I was in Izmir last month, and it seems I am the most frequent visitor in the neighboring country. Again, it's a great pleasure to be here. It's the second time in Antalya, and I represent the ISNP, which stands for the International Society of Neurobiology and Pharmacology. It's a newly founded organization. It was founded in 2008 by a group of people, including Hagopa Kiskal, Hans-Jürgen Meller, Siegfried Kasper, and others. And the aim was to facilitate education and training, especially in the East Mediterranean and Eastern Europe area. So it's a great pleasure to collaborate with the Turkish Association of Psychopharmacology in this, I hope, very important event by co-organizing two symposia, one today and one tomorrow.
Thank you very much, dear Fontolakis.
Well, the first speech will be delivered by Mr. Fontolakis, and his title is Targeting Specific Receptors and Neurotransmitter Systems in the Treatment of Bipolar Disorder. So I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Fontolakis for his speech.
So I will be the first speaker, and I will talk about the neurobiological substrate of treatment in bipolar disorder. And as you all know, we have two facets. It's not entirely accurate that we have two facets, but this is the classical description of bipolar disorder. We have two poles. One is mania, mixed, and the other pole is depression. Of course, there are a number of other conditions that mix or intermediate between these conditions. And it is not really difficult, at least not so difficult, to treat mania and mixed episodes. The most difficult thing is to treat bipolar depression, which is highly refractory and does not resemble unipolar depression. I'm going to present data and interpretations on the basis of this paper, which we co-authored with John Kelso and Hagopa Kiskal from San Diego, on the basis of a thorough analysis of existing literature. Traditionally, depression is treated by antidepressants. And this is a chronological chart of the evolution of antidepressants from imipramine in 1957 to the double and triple action antidepressants of the future through the SSRIs in the late 80s and early 90s. The first antidepressant was introduced in 1957, as I said, by Ronald Kuhn. The problem is that in bipolar disorder, patients spend at least 1/3 of their lives in depression, and we suggest that half of their lives is in euthemic mood, but in fact they suffer from at least some kind of dysphoria or subthreshold depression, and burden and disability is highly prevalent in these populations. Mania and mixed episodes are at most affecting 15% of their lifespan. So our biggest problem here and the source of disability and burden is bipolar depression and not bipolar mania. And it is unfortunate that most of research until today focuses on mania and not on bipolar depression. This is the burden associated with bipolar disorder. This is an old chart by the WHO suggests that bipolar disorder is 6th, but today we know that many unipolar depressions are in fact bipolar, so bipolar disorder is probably 1st or 2nd in this classification of causes of disability adjusted life years. It is unfortunate again that psychiatry has 1, 2, 3, 4 and maybe 5, 6 out of the 10 most disabling medical conditions. So the question is, which agents are efficacious and how they act, because what we know from unipolar depression is not readily and easily carried out in bipolar depression. We need to identify which agents have definitely positive results, which agents have definitely negative results, to contrast them, and then to identify how these clinical results correlate with the underlying neurobiology substrates of these agents and bipolar disorder. So the first step was to do a deep Medline search with keywords including mania, mixed, bipolar, manic depression, manic depressive, etc., to locate randomized controlled trials. And also we checked various repositories like the clinicaltrials.gov or the clinicalstudyresults.org. And then we scanned all the relevant review papers to see if we missed any trial. And what we found was somehow unexpected. Everything is included in the WPA section of pharmacopsychiatry report on the treatment of bipolar disorder, but let me briefly summarize here. Lithium has only one study and it is negative. There are some concerns on the dosage of lithium, but still the data we have are negative. We cannot say that lithium is effective in bipolar depression. Valproate has only 2 very small studies, positive but very small, and it is not appropriate to interpret them in the way we used to interpret randomized controlled trials today. They are old-fashioned trials. There are 2 more recent trials. One is positive and one is negative. Neither of them are published. Carbamazepine has 1 positive, very small, old withdrawal study. We cannot take it into consideration. And lamotrigine has 5 negative placebo-controlled trials. We're talking about acute bipolar depression, not the prevention of bipolar depression. And again, these studies are not published. They are included in 1 paper as a report, but nothing more. The old-fashioned drugs like amitriptyline, imipramine, and fluoxetine have some data, but it's very difficult to judge. They are old-fashioned data. What has very strong support is the olanzapine-fluoxetine combination, the so-called OFC, which has 1 positive placebo-controlled trial with the number need to treat, which is very good, is 4. The number need to treat is a number you get when you subtract the percentage of people who respond to the agent minus the responders to placebo, and then you reverse the number. And for example, if you have 40% responders in the drug and 20% responsive to placebo, you have 40 minus 20, it gives you 20. 20%, if you reverse it, it is 100 by 20, it gives you a number of 5, number need to treat 5. And here we have 4, which is very good. As a comparison, you should know that statins have, I think, a number need to treat of approximately 10 or 20, and aspirin in cardiovascular disorder, I think it has 100 or so. Paroxetine has 1 negative placebo-controlled study. That means that paroxetine does not work. And I know a lot of patients that come to me and are under paroxetine or similar antidepressants. So there is no class effect of antidepressants in the treatment of bipolar depression. There are some uncontrolled data concerning paroxetine, valafexine, bupropion, imipramine. Well, they have a flavor of positivity, but we cannot really rely on them because they are not controlled. Olanzapine alone as monotherapy has some positive data, one positive randomized control trial, but the problem with olanzapine alone, without fluoxetine, is that it does not affect the depressive core, that is, the items assessing depressed mood and anhedonia. Olanzapine alone improves weight, improves appetite, sleep, agitation and anxiety, but not depressed mood. Quetiapine has very strong positive data with 5 positive placebo-controlled trials, and again has a number need to treat similar to the olanzapine-fluoxetine combination, 4 and 5. Aripiprazole, on the other hand, and ziprasidone have negative studies, 2 for aripiprazole and for ziprasidone, and it's not a matter of dosage as we initially thought. Add-on studies are uncontrolled mostly, and although again there is a flavor of positive results, the results are not of sufficient quality to take into consideration. The only combination treatment that has solid data to rely is lamotrigine plus lithium. The lamotrigine-lithium combination seems to be better than placebo. We have negative data for ziprasidone. We have negative data for the combination of risperidone plus paroxetine. So in some guidelines, they say you take an antimanic plus an antidepressant, an SSRI, and that's okay. But we know that this is not the case. A strong example is that risperidone plus paroxetine does not work. So you need specific agents to be combined with specific others to have a truly positive result. Meta-analytical studies help us in refining the results I already showed you, and they are positive for valproics. I remind you that we had 1 positive and 1 negative study. The meta-analysis suggests that the overall result is positive. It seems that the 5 negative trials of lamotrigine include a weak signal for the most severely depressed patients. That's questionable, and we could debate on that, but still it seems there is a signal there. The aripiprazole trials might have also a signal which is weak but still there. The meta-analysis of antidepressant trials is negative, but again this is problematic as a concept because they used all 15 antidepressants as a class in this meta-analysis, and we know that in bipolar depression there is no class effect, so by definition this meta-analysis is not correct. And other meta-analyses, again, on antidepressants are negative. What meta-analysis suggests, and it is important, is that patients who do not respond at week 2 should be considered to change treatment. So the old concept we had that bipolar depression responds slower and later might not be correct. Also, another issue with antidepressants is whether they do switch to the opposite pole, that is, whether they induce manic episodes or they roughen the patient and induce mixed episodes, which again does not seem to be the case. SSRIs in general does not work at all and do not induce the opposite pole, do not switch patients, with the exception maybe of venlafaxine, where there is some data suggesting that double-acting agents like venlafaxine, like tricyclics, might induce some roughening or some switching. Conclusively, if we summarize the evidence for the treatment of bipolar depression, what we find is that only quetiapine in the olanzapine-fluoxetine combination are effective against acute bipolar depression. I must add today that also there are some data for lurasidone. It has been approved in the US but not in Europe yet. So only these agents seem to be efficacious against acute bipolar depression, while the data for the rest of agents are negative. negative for aripiprazole, for lamotrigine, paroxetine, bupropion, ziprasidone, olanzapine monotherapy, and inconclusive for fluoxetine monotherapy, which might be efficacious as monotherapy in bipolar II depression. That's for the first question, the efficacy. Now we must deal with the second question, which is neurobiology. And this is very complex and much more biased than the efficacy question. The efficacy question is biased mostly by the fact that the industry sponsors most randomized controlled trials. Here we have a number of additional problems. Of course, most of the neurobiological research on agents is sponsored by the industry, but there are some companies which put much emphasis on the properties of their products. And if you have such a company with an old product, then you have a bulk of research. And it tends to show that this agent has multiple properties. Just to make an example, Eli Lilly has much investment on the neurobiological research of its product. So when you have fluoxetine, which is an old product, and Lilly to put money on this, you have a very well researched product. Other companies do not do that, and we have many gaps in our knowledge and many question marks. However, what we did was to give the generic name plus a number of neurobiological keywords like reuptake, 1A, 1B, 5-H3, nicotinic, blah, blah, and we divided agents into two bigger groups, the agonists, which included superagonists, agonists, and coagonists, and into blockers, which included competitive, non-competitive, uncompetitive, and others. Partial agonists and antagonists were categorized as blockers. This is the case mostly with aripiprazole. And we arrived at this table. It's a single table. It's too large to be included in a single slide. You can find it in the paper if you want to read it carefully. What we did was to have in the horizontal line the agents. This is aripiprazole, bupropion, lamotrigine, paroxetine, ziprasidone, olanzapine, fluoxetine, quetiapine, OFC. And here we have the neurobiological markers. Reuptake inhibition by serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, glutamate, GABA. And what we see is that the negative data agents versus the positive agents differ. The first thing is that we wanted the positive agents to have to agree on this effect, that is, both positive agents to have a positive sign here. So the first thing was to select those neurobiological factors which have 100% appearance in the positive agents group, in the group of agents that work against bipolar depression. And then we found out which of them have maximum difference from the agents which do not work against bipolar depression. And we arrived at a very specific number of neurobiological substrates, like the norepinephrine receptors alpha 1, the dopamine D1, D2, and D3, the histamine H1, and nothing else. It is interesting to see that reuptake inhibition, serotonin reuptake inhibition, does not seem to play a role. So if you have an antidepressant who is mainly a reuptake inhibitor, this does not work. You need to put pressure on receptors. And to be very simplistic, the A1 receptor and the 2C or the 2A are the most important, because one is the accelerator and the other is the brake. If you have a car, you have the accelerator and you have a brake. And what antidepressants do is that they block reuptake, which means more fuel in the engine, and then they press the accelerator and block the brake. This is what seems to be the case here. Bipolar depression needs acceleration and no brakes. So this is the model we have. The stronger predictors are alpha-1, D1, and histamine antagonism, followed by HT2A, muscarinic, and dopamine, D2 and D3. And to be more visual, this is a visual depiction of the model. In the core, we have norepinephrine reuptake and 5-HT1A agonism. This is the accelerator. And it seems that dopamine blockade is important in order to avoid switching. But norepinephrine is also important in order to facilitate response. And the muscarinic system, the cholinergic system, here acts like a bridge between the dopaminergic and the serotoninergic and norepinephrinergic systems, because there is in the human brain, in the human nervous system, it seems that in many systems we have couples of neurotransmitters acting in balanced activities. So when you foster the one, you cause imbalance in the system. So you cannot inflict a change without affecting the rest of the systems. This is why you need to tackle multiple targets and multiple systems simultaneously. And this is an even more simplified version of the model. So, in the future, we need a single, ideally, we need a single molecule that's a so-called passepartout, has multiple sites which can bind to multiple receptors in a variety of ways, and only if we have such a molecule that can simultaneously bind and trigger more than one but specific second messenger systems, only in this way we can have a treatment effect in bipolar disorder, a balanced effect on bipolar disorder. My guess is that norepinephrine is crucial for bipolar depression, and dopamine is crucial, anti-dopaminergic effect is crucial for the anti-manic effect. Thank you very much.